Law. Now, for our third presentation today, it will be delivered by Professor Dr. Aasim Padela, who is from the Medical College of Wisconsin. Professor Aasim is currently the professor and vice chair of research and scholarship for the Department of Emergency Medicine. He is also the professor of bioethics and medical humanities at the Institute of Health and Equity at the Medical College of Wisconsin, too. Professor Aasim's projects covers critical issues related to cancer screening, organ donation, end-of-life care, and the intersection of religion and life. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Aasim Padela to deliver his talk entitled Human Enhancement and Transhumanism. Are we changing, and should we change our being? Please welcome.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa ajma'in. So we're going to move, inshallah, now to the practical, one of the practical seminars. We got the epistemic framework and the important questions from Sheikh Omar. And this seminar that I'm going to walk you through sits in the middle of the curriculum. And I would argue is the most relevant to medical sciences because it deals with the entity that medicine is about, the human being, but the future of the human being. Right? What will the human being look like through the application of biotechnologies? Right? You were talking about the hadaf, what are our goals as physicians? So that's the core, and we do this seminar in the middle of the 7 seminars because this addresses the professional identity that Muslim practitioners, physicians, allied health professionals will have. So you might say, and I'm going to walk you through the seminar, but I'm going to give you some things, some fodder for thought. You might say that things like this, human cyborgs, are the realm of science fiction. But the reality is that Captain Cyborg, Kevin Warwick, is an individual who lives today. And he experimented in being able to control arms that are not his, biological ones, from a distance using radio frequencies over 20 years ago. Right? You might say that genetic engineering to manipulating the human being's blueprint, according to bioscience, so that human beings might be able to live in environments that are different than the ones that we currently inhabit, is the realm of science future, science fiction. But the reality today is that there are individuals in Silicon Valley who have used money to be able to genetically manipulate their own genetic structure so that they might live nearly forever. Right? So this individual says, this slide says a bit different. So there was a different picture there. But let me relate to this guy. This individual here wanted to not genetically manipulate, I apologize, but rather he wanted to beat Lou Gehrig's disease. And in order to do that, he wanted to do surgeries that would replace parts of his body. And he called himself, right, the human cyborg, Peter 2.0. So the context and what's at stake, but the main questions on this slide set or this seminar relate to the notion that if biomedical interventions change our body, then are we slowly transforming ourselves into something beyond the human species, right? Moving from a transitional state to a post-human state. And are physicians, doctors, unwittingly contributing to this future? As Muslims, bringing the Islamic perspective, the question becomes, are we, right, as Muslims, are we taught some moral limits that we should be aware of, particularly around desiring a future for humanity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us against? And is there such a thing as a notion of changing our being, right, that Islam would validate? So the seminar worked in this sort of fashion. As I mentioned, I'm going to give you some touch points here. That we would start the seminar for about 20 minutes talking about this philosophy, this ideology of transhumanism. We would then have a didactic, which I would give, and I'm going to model that and give you that didactic today on biomedical intervention and biological futures. We would then have a religious scholar talk about revelatory insights, scriptural insights from the Quran and Sunnah about enhancing our being. And then the students would have a video recasting. Again, I'll show you those videos. This is in your jump drives. But they would basically take popular narratives that they imbibe readily, movies that they see, And they would be asked to recast, to first identify the transhumanistic ideologies embedded within those videos, and then recast them in an Islamic sort of way, right? To see where there might be a potential different ideology or different aspiration that Islam might have. And we would grade and talk about those together. And then we would end the seminar with deliberation over a clinical case, right? Because physicians are taught primarily through cases. So we'd have a case where we would have them think, you're a physician, you're asked to do something. Here are some specific characters. They're asking you things. Would you not do this? Are you unwittingly changing your people's nature? So to begin with, and I'm going to ask Dr. We used videos that were in the public domain. So this was a video on transhumanism. I'm going to see if we're able to play it. Let's see. I don't think so. Okay, so there was a video, 2-minute video that talks about transhumanism. And the essential elements of that video talked about the idea that human beings are unfinished product of evolution. And the goal of transhumanism is to extend ourselves, our beings, via bioscience technology beyond the limits of our frail bodies. How do we do that? So there are many different activities that are involved. One of them has to do with incorporating super functioning body parts. As I mentioned, cyborg sort of arms or other aspects of the physical body. One other activity is about uploading and preserving the mind, whatever the mind might be according to bioscience. But this is a common, actually, end goal of transhumanism. And the third would be to genetically engineer our bodies for better function. So this was the video. Let's see, maybe it'll work now. No, it won't. Will it work? I don't know. We'll move forward for the sake of time. But basically, we used, again, teaching you, things that are already out there in the public media. We didn't want to create new videos around concepts, right? So this is a BBC Ideas. It's only 2 minutes, but it gets you the essential aspects of this. As we know, our students don't like to read too much. So if I were to give them the Transhumanist Manifesto, right, they wouldn't read it. So rather, we'd give them these 2-minute clips to reflect upon in a group activity. After that's done, and we have a reflection and conversation around transhumanism, then I would give a physician talk about biomedicine and biobiological features. And now I'm going to actually model that talk for you. I'm not going to go through all of those aspects as I would in a 45-minute lecture, but some of these things are really important for you as instructors or potential instructors to think about. And for those of you who are physicians, this is going to push you to think in certain ways. And that's why the dean of the Kuliya of Medicine left. I told him that last night he wouldn't like my lecture if I spoke about it. So you'll see that this is going to push you to think about what you're doing on your daily practices. So oftentimes, we think about what doctors do. When I ask medical students, first-year medical students, what is the relationship between doctors and medicine? They say, we're here to cure doctors and disease. We're here to cure disease. Well, then sometimes they say, we're here to eliminate disease. Right? So a motif of sort of curing, helping, assisting, to a motif of sort of combating, right, disease. I asked them, well, the core function perhaps, is it that physicians actually define disease? And for the medical students at the first year medical school, they find this a really odd question. So I say, well, if you think about disease, this term, this concept of disease, there are many ways in which you can define disease. In the practice of medicine, right, the golden handshake that we make of our medicine, there are at least 4 ways in which we define disease. One of them is dis-ease. Being ill at ease. And the person who thinks about whether they're at ease is whom? The subject, the patient. Another way to think about that is disability, right? That this is defined by the subject. I am unable to do something, or by a society that says you should be able to do something. So an example might be when we have individuals who have to be moved in wheelchairs, we used to call them in the States, disabled individuals. That they should be able to walk, right? So they might define it themselves, or society might define this is what the functioning abilities of society should be. Another way is disorder. So for the biologists here, we might say, well, we know that your mitochondria are supposed to work this way, right? And when you have a mitochondrial disease, there's a disorder there because your mitochondria are not processing XYZ things in a certain way. So this is defined by society, but I mean by professional society. Often it's tied to function. And the last would be dysfunction here, where we might say that there's an abnormality, impairment, or some sort of deviation from a norm, right? That is defined either by social behavior of individuals or by some physiological notion that we have rooted in the biosciences. So physicians at the core, I would argue, first, primarily, define disease. That biomedicine defines disease in many of these ways, which sets up social expectations of what doctors should do. And I'm going to walk you through the example. So this is a slide here of individuals of varying height. Some might say someone's too short on that slide, right, compared to the other two individuals. Now, if I were to walk you through the data, now, as I hope Professor Omar mentioned, we go through empirical data. So if you look at the empirical data in this case, around height in the world, you'll notice that across the centuries, we have had changing of human height, right? And you see here males and females have now almost plateaued, but there was an increase of height across the early part of the 20th century. That sort of height changes by country, obviously. That's aggregate across the world. So you see here, United States, you see with Saudi Arabia, people weren't of any height before 1940. And it looks like after 1930, there are no heights for Malaysians. But my point being here, that there is some sort of trend line of human height, again here, mostly increasing. But we draw the example of Turkey for the students because what was happening in Turkey in the 1930s? The war, right? This was the revolution. And so you see that social conditions impacted height, a biological attribute, in this case, a property of the human being. So you see this, what are these sorts of curves called? Normal curves of height with standard deviations across them, right? So now we're using statistics to help us think about what is normal. What happens to this is that this is a way for us to socially and culturally construct a disease. And what disease am I going to construct? Do you know what these things are? Physicians know this, right? The pediatricians know this. That at every childhood visit, we, in the early parts of someone's life, we plot their height and weight of the child in front of us. And on that height and growth curve, you have standard deviations of 2, right? Either way. And within those lines, you're called normal. But this individual here, as you see in terms of their height, is dropping off that normal curve. And when we see something that's abnormal, what do physicians say? We need to treat it. We have to understand what's going on. So when you find no answers in your bioscience for someone's height falling off the curve, you call it the disease of idiopathic short stature. Meaning I have no idea as a scientist why you have height that I will make the truth claim is abnormal for a human being in your society. But don't worry about it. I'm going to give you a solution for it. I make a claim of no knowledge, but I attach a social label that you are diseased. And then bioscience and technology says, well, let's fix that. Now you might say that's not exactly the case, but let me give you further evidence for why that is the case. I said we have biosocial and cultural construction of disease. So the bio is the fact that the individual has a lower height. What's the social? So we find in studies empirically here that individuals who have differing heights have harms associated with their height when it's abnormal, off the curve. So this is a study in the UK. We know some things about taller men. This is a large study of almost 120,000 people. The individuals who are taller in society, on average, have higher levels of mean education, and that correlates with higher incomes. So being tall in UK society leads to positives socially. What about the other side? Well, if you're shorter as a child, we know in studies that you're prone to bullying, and that leads to psychological impacts that last on to adulthood. And some of us might have those personal experiences or those in people in our families. And for both ends, spectrums now, Men who are shorter and women who are taller than the normal have fewer romantic prospects. Their wellness, right, will be affected. So we have the bio, height. Now we have the social, where the social harms of certain types of off the spectrum heights leads to difficulties in living. That combines to then where the medical comes in, the medical culture. Well, we're going to fix this problem for you. We're going to address this malady. And now again, how? Well, we're going to do so with basically hormonal therapies. The physicians here know this. But I want you to note, and maybe it's not highlighted, look at this middle column, psychological benefit or harm. What do we know about all the things that will give you and your child to become taller? We don't know anything about it. We didn't know what the reason for the disease was, nor do we know anything about the cure. But what do we do as a practice? We give you something, right? So again, I'm really glad the dean of the Kuliya of Medicine is not here, but this is the conversation we have with the students. So the points here are that diseases are variably defined. Bioscience can define a disease based on the idea of a normal spectrum, then develop treatments to address that dysfunction. But here we know that human bodies change over time and in societies. So the claim here about this property of the human being, of the height of the human being, is that's an empirically based claim. Medicine makes claims about around uncertainty around whether the cause of disease, what the cause of disease is, and what the cure should be. All right, so that's the biological features conversation. So if you're moving to making people taller, because that's better, physicians are involved in that. So I gave you the hormonal example here, but we know that, and that's done for children, but we know that in certain societies, you have a prohibition against doing certain types of interventions, but in others it's different. So what am I speaking to specifically? So in the United States, I am not allowed to break someone's femur and extend their leg by putting pins in it, right? But in Turkey, I am as a physician. So we have medical tourism for adults from the United States to Turkey to have leg lengthening procedures. So people go to Turkey, it costs less than you in the United States. And they spend 6 months there and they do rehab there. And orthopedists, the orthopedist isn't here either, so that's good. They perform this service. Oh, he's right here. I didn't see you. Orthopedist in Turkey, not in Malaysia. So you're safe. Do this to increase height. So that, and usually it's individuals who have few romantic prospects, and they believe that being taller will lead to those romantic prospects. But that boundary position for physicians in our profession is all between what you can and cannot do is divided between therapy and enhancement. You might in your teaching talk about that, right? That there's this clear dividing line between therapy and enhancement. But I'm going to problematize that for you. As instructors in this curriculum, you need to be honest and clear-eyed about what we do as physicians. So one way to differentiate between therapy and enhancement is that whatever physicians do is therapy, what they don't do is enhancement. So the example I just gave, in medicine in the United States, physicians don't do leg lengthening procedures. That's an enhancement if you were to do it. So it can't be part of our professional practice. But in Turkey, the same qualified individual would provide that service and they would be considered to be doing therapy, not enhancement. Right? Another way is to restore to normal function versus augmenting function. So if something in society, because diseases are defined by society, if something creates equality of opportunity, in this case, romantic prospects, right? If you create equality of opportunity, then you're performing therapy. Okay? And if you're creating inequities in opportunities in society, you're doing an enhancement. So I can, instead of lengthening your legs, put prosthetics so that you can run faster. That's creating inequality. That would be considered enhancement, not therapy. The last is that what is the status of the individual being subjected to an intervention? So if the person who you're dealing with is a person who has normal functioning, then you're targeting an individual with normal functioning and you're doing something to make them super normal, that's enhancement. But if an individual who does not have normal functioning is the target of therapy, of intervention, and that is therapy. These, again, just like diseases, I said, they have complementary definitions. These therapy versus enhancement, these dividing lines are not fully clear. And I don't know how you teach in medicine here, but I'll tell you, when I was going through medicine in the United States, no one talked about this in our first, second, third, fourth year. Only when we got to specific surgical clerkships and things would we actually have a conversation about the boundaries between therapy and enhancement. But if you define diseases, this is an important thing to think about. So that's basically in more detail what we go through in the teaching to destabilize the notions of disease and the changing of human bodies. The second part of the seminar, Sheikh Hamza Karam Ali would go through things that you all know. So I'm going to kind of go through them. I'm going to show you them. I'm not going to go through them. But he would speak about Quranic ayat, right? So now we have empirical claims. We talk about how that relates to practice. Now we're going to talk about scriptural claims about humanity. And we're going to weigh them on a spectrum of certainty because we're going to use Quran. And Quran has the highest level of epistemic certainty. And we're going to talk about those, and then we get to the question of the activities. So you'll see here, and I'm not going to go through them because of time, but these are things I'm sure you all know, that we talk about the scriptural text here, the Quran, talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the one. Ibrahim al-Islam here is quoted, that he's the one who cures me. We know the ahadith of Rasulullah around that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who brings down or sends down disease and cure. So we discuss these for the students, that these are scriptural evidences about how disease, or in this case malady, that term da'a has a specific meaning. Shifa has cure, healing, right? They're different terms here. Those universal terms, what they mean. But we attribute things to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this figure is kind of what we go through, right? That for the human being, as the other seminars talk about, the human being is composite of a body, a mind, and a soul, that your ailment, your da'a, can be in any of these realms. But the one who is sending it to you is Ar-Rahim, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that affliction. And who is the one who's going to control your outcome? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the responsibility of the human being is to traverse that malady in life, that illness, with a certain type of comportment, adab. Because, as I'll show you in a few seconds, that character, that adab, has correlations to the outcome of that disease. And we don't neglect the fact that you should seek healthcare, but that healthcare that should be thought about, right, is in the context of a God-centric system where there are other means to relieving your malady. Then Sheikh Hamza then talks about, and you have the videos that you linked to in the teaching modules, this verse where transhumanism was about moving human frailty, right? And one of the notions of the transhumanism activities is to upload minds. So he talks about this verse and says, what is this verse for the students? What does it tell you? That there was a desire, there was a entreatment by shaitan to our father, Adam alayhi salam, about partaking from the tree. For what purpose? Right? That you would live forever. So the inspiration to try to live forever, right, is something that was attributed to a satanic source. We know that living together, he goes through this as well, that our life has many stages. Right? That death is just a portal to another phase of existence in the barzakh, in the grave, in the afterlife. So then we have students think about, well, what does it mean to want to live as an uploaded mind in some computer simulation for the rest of eternity? Is that something that we would juxtapose with Islam? Then we end he ends that conversation with, what does it mean to make humans better? And the humans here is in boxes because humans is the composite of all of those components, not just the bodily aspect. So you see those verses here. Again, I'm not going to go through them. You have these slide sets. I mentioned 2 group activities. I'm going to give you a sense of what they are, and then we're going to close this part. So the group activity I mentioned to you, and this is really important when you teach curricula, you have to know what students are partaking of. So this is even dated now. I'm sure there are movies now that that speak about these things. So you have to find your own videos. But at that time, Avatar 2 was going to come around, and everybody was looking at the book of Boba Fett, right? The Star Wars. So we use these ideas, these videos here that talk about the Avatar. It is what? Uploading someone's mind to another body. And in The Mandalorian, there was a scene, and you link to them. If you have these slides that you can link to them, you can see the scene we picked out, where this individual, this assassin, was shot, and then she gets cybernetic implants. And the guy actually speaks about her living after that her life was with the cybernetic implants. We asked the stories to be recasted. And you will find that students had some superficial recasting to more deep. I want to tell you what the students in Malaysia did, some of them. Right? So some of them would not deal with the ideology. They say, well, you have to have separate wards for men and female. That would make it Islamic. That was their notion of Islamicness. Huh? Separate wards for men and women. Others said, well, if you upload your body into an avatar that can fight better in jihad, this is Islamic. So it tells you a sense of where your students are in their understanding of Islam. So I'm just giving you some examples. I thought that was interesting, but we want them to have a deep understanding of what the purposes of life are, right? Not the functional notions of for jihad purposes, it's okay. Maybe that's their fatwa, or the fact that we just make you can change your body and put cybernetic implants as long as a female does it for you, and for a female, a male does it for male, it's okay. And the last bit was, again, popular media. So there was an article around transhumanism and biohacking. Again, when we were teaching the seminar, biohacking was a big, and still is, was a big thing. So we had students take characters in the story, each with their own narrative. And I think later on this afternoon, Dr. Yusuf wants us to have a conversation around one of these cases. And we say, would you, as a Muslim physician, help that patient to do what they're asking you to do? So for example, here, there was an individual who had an implant so they could feel colors, right? The other individual has a cybernetic eye so they can see screens. This other person had a car accident and they said, I want a stronger arm, right? If I want to have a prosthesis, not one that's barely functional, but one that's super functional. And all of those things require physicians' biological knowledge and practice. So we asked them, would you do this? This is ethical. To help them get an identity around what the professional identity of U.S. physicians would be. So that's that. I'm going to end kind of with entreating you to explore the curriculum webpage where we have the videos, we have the links, we have the slide sets and the assessments. And barakallahu fikum, I will end there. But that's my seminar, inshallah, or not my seminar, the seminar I co-taught with Sheikh Hamza Karmali, thinking about human features. Jazakallah khair.